So this on-ramp argument is that people that are within the walled garden today are going to become paying consumers of the internet tomorrow. And that argument does not work with the last thing which you said, which is affordability. So it might be the case in our market that many people cannot afford the internet at all. So there is a dystopia. So because there is no evidence, we have to go with anybody, all the various possible futures that are presented to us. So one of the main volunteers for internet.org, so for Save the Internet campaign, is a chap called Rohin Dharmakumar. He used to be a journalist and now is an entrepreneur. And on his Twitter account, he paints a possible picture, which is what will happen is that ISPs will lower all the FUPs. They will say that FUPs are now only for 3 GB or so, and everything that you consume on top of that should be consumed in a pro rata fashion. Yeah? They can do this. And that will force people to enter the walled gardens. And Facebook walled garden is perhaps less evil than the Airtel walled garden, because then Airtel is much more clear gatekeeper, unlike Facebook. And then the Airtel walled garden may not come with the terms of the Facebook walled garden, which is that nobody has to pay anybody anything. So Rohin is afraid that once we have, in a growing market like India, where only 300 million users are currently on the internet, if we manage to get 300 million users in the walled garden, then the companies will go out to people that want to be featured in the walled garden and gouge them for money, because it's easier to gouge few people for larger amounts of money than to get this 300 million people who are at the bottom of the pyramid to pay small amounts of money. So that is the Rohin Dharmakumar dystopia of why, if we allow telcos and Facebook to get a footing, things can dramatically change in the Indian context, because we have no idea how this market is going to work. So the more data that you can place in the public domain and the more research that is actually independently audited makes this on-ramp argument more credible. Otherwise, the on-ramp argument is actually a very slippery argument, because we have no idea. Then this relevance business is actually nudges in a marketplace. By limiting the options, even if it is 18, it is configuring the competition in that marketplace. So will we then see massive disruptions like WhatsApp? We have no idea. So those are two immediate responses to what you just said. Focusing on benefits, we need more evidence, I suppose, to say that Facebook by itself with the 80 accompanying sites is a benefit, and is more of a benefit compared to general unfettered internet. And if through regulation, because most of your argument was about why this did not make sense for Facebook and why it did not make sense for the telcos, right? That was your defense for why you did things in a particular way. That's of no importance at a regulatory discussion. Whether it makes sense for you or it doesn't make sense for you, regulators may or may not be swayed by those arguments. For regulator, the primary argument is public interest. And if the internet in its current form has delivered so much of good and innovation and competition, then perhaps protecting some of the fundamental core principles and values of the internet is important, and therefore they will subject you to regulatory action because they know you're going to change your product. If you've already changed your product so much, then you could change your product more, right? So we won't give up. And why should we as citizens and researchers, if we know that we can twist your arms and get a better deal out of Facebook, why would we give up on that option, right? So no matter what you say, we're going to go after you, right? You see there'll be more telcos?
The entry level is, entry barriers are quite low.
set up a free basic.
See, if Airtel is a company that wants to provide something like Facebook, and there are many more companies that want to do the same thing, there is competition among them with reference to segregating some of the harm that each of the companies is trying to do.
Yes.
So why is that not a better situation?
So this comes back to what I said initially, and I said that it's a complex phenomenon, and that we need to worry about competition law or competition policy, and we need to be aware of how competition is different in this market and other markets. In America, there are only two big telcos, and therefore network neutrality debate is even more important in that market. In India, we have at least 8 important telcos, maybe 12 in all, and therefore maybe competition will mitigate some of the harms in this market, right? This is the argument. The opposition to that argument is that in India, if you look at the way telcos have behaved when it comes to launching services, configuring prices and so on, even though we didn't need price control and prices dropped through the floor of what the regulator had set in terms of price control, the telcos seem to move in lockstep. So therefore, maybe they won't allow competition to address this problem. And the second thing to say, and my poor Facebook friends have disappeared, is there might be all sorts of asymmetric deals going on that we won't fully understand. Okay? So, and this is a very straightforward project for somebody who's technically minded and wants to do, which is take your device and use it for 2 weeks with your Facebook account. In 1 week, allow autoplay videos to be turned on, and the other week, turn off autoplay videos. So very strangely, Facebook and Twitter have, with one of the updates, changed the setting, and now videos autoplay on these devices. It's not easy to turn them off. You have to count a little bit to find the control. So the conspiracy theory could be that from the paying consumers, you suddenly have 50% more billing, which you can now subsidize, which you can use to subsidize. So we don't know whether that decision to turn autoplay on had anything to do with free basics. Right? Because suddenly all the telcos are going to be able to charge, it's a default setting, right? So of course, if I say this in a research paper, people will say there's no evidence. I have no evidence, but it's just two facts. There may be no causation or causality or correlation between them, but that is something to say. Yeah. So we have. So that's why competition then with Reliance Jio. What Reliance Jio is going to do is it's going to zero rate all Reliance media destinations. Will this be something that the Competition Commission can act on immediately, or will it take 3 years for the Competition Commission to act? By then, people have a different expectation from the internet. Then people want to watch videos, they only go to. So, we're not sure. And in 2 cases documented by Learnasia in their submission to try, one instance from Australia and another instance from America, zero rating saved competition. That means zero rating allowed somebody who was not very competitive to establish themselves in the market. So we have the opposite. So in the telco or in the ISP space, it looks like zero rating is protective of competition, at least from these 2 case studies. So, yeah. As I said, I will come and share my confusion and the agony of trying to form an opinion with you, frankly. So I'm not sure about any of the things that I'm saying. And if I were to give if I had to give this very same talk, even a week ago, it would have been a very different talk. So I'm trying to form my opinion on this topic as I'm thinking it through.
I'm glad you say so.
Yes.
So, my question might be to My question might be too basic, and I'm not sure I fully grasped the technicalities of the discussion here today. But you mentioned in the beginning the irreversibility problem, that once you impose a mechanism in the market and it gets entrenched, then it's very hard to reverse it. So could it be the case that most of the supporters of net neutrality are those section of the populace who are already quite used to the free internet system? And if you look at other commodities or the way markets usually function, there is ways in which the service providers do segregate into components the service they provide and charge them accordingly. So the telecom or electricity, for example. So what happens?
Electricity, you don't charge something for a fridge or something else for it.
No. How is tariff determined for 1 unit of electricity we consume? There is a fuel component, there is a non-fuel component, there is a capital cost involved, and the distribution charge component. So on and so forth. So why does it, when it comes to internet services, we are not ready to conceptualize internet services the same way we conceptualize other markets?
Okay, I don't know electricity, so I can't speak to the. Huh?
None this.
Okay.
No, my
But
point is
I shouldn't
simply.
forget one second.
So my point is simply this: there is a prevailing theory, the prevailing principle of policy and governance. So why is it too hard to extend the same to internet? Well, for internet, it is something inherently big or controversial. So could it be because those people who oppose this move are those people who are so entrenched with the current system? And when I pay for 1 unit of electricity, I don't question the different components involved. And governments do regulate it, and governments do impose their policy in whatever way possible.
I got the question. Thank you.
Next question, and please keep your question short.
So, while you mentioned how Internet Protocol these compromises in India, you mentioned how HTTPS was reintroduced. From a privacy perspective, I still see a problem with that. Like, for example, if I access a pornography website, they still know I'm watching porn.
Yes.
So, my question is far more technical in the way that is there any possibility that can we come up with a system where Facebook, internet.org stays, but they do not get to access what we are watching? And if yes, what is their, like, I don't know what the perspective is, but do they have a perspective on this, that why they're not implementing such a system?
And
So there are other jurisdictions. What is state of the data protection or privacy laws and how problematic this entire debate is enact such a legal framework with other countries and all that? How does that play?
Okay. So the first argument is that those who defend network neutrality already have access, and the way it was done is 1 million people sent submissions to try, and then Cellular Operators Association of India sent an SMS to millions of Indians, and you were asked to give a missed call to a particular number if you supported free internet. And I think it is anywhere between 4 to 8 million people that gave the missed call saying that they support free or gratis provision of the internet. Yeah? So in some senses, the evidence supports your argument, at least the COAI survey. And Rohan Samarajiva, who's the head of the think tank in Learn Asia, calls this Bostonian paternalism. That you have what you need, but now you're not willing to allow other people to have less, and so on. It's an interesting argument, but that argument is based on the assumption that it's not possible to have non-network neutrality, various access models that are still respecting the principles of network neutrality, right? So that's what it assumes.
It could benefit the consumers on the other end.
Yeah. So I think increasingly what is clear is that there are a variety of models to provide access, free access or subsidized access, and it's not useful to talk about that without looking into each model in a more granular fashion. The second question about bundling, unbundling is very interesting, and in the world of television, unbundling has served consumer interest and unbundling has served competition. So the argument will be, then why not in the internet also be unbundled, right? So there, again, I'm not very sure. There are some interesting papers by Barbara von Scheveck, who's the head of Stanford Center for Internet and Society. She's looked at this unbundling, bundling debate, and she makes the argument that the internet is distinct and it is not the same as cable television, because cable television is like from a fixed menu, you're bundling and unbundling. When it comes to the internet, there is no finite list of services. We don't even know what is going to emerge tomorrow, and that's the innovation harm. That's why she keeps speaking about the innovation harms of network neutrality. In India, we have more software engineers than Estonia has citizens, but in Estonia they produce Skype, and that's a global product. And that disruption potential of two engineers sitting in their bedroom, that is what we will lose out on, even if we go to the unbundled universe that you're looking at. So that's what we are worried about, because we don't know what new value will be unlocked. Like popcorn TV. Who uses popcorn TV here? Nobody uses popcorn TV? Okay, at least some people use popcorn TV. So popcorn TV is just like Napster, but it's for video. So it's illegal, of course. So I'm not endorsing it in any way. But it's very efficient on the network. So rather than streaming all the way from the Netflix server, if enough people in Bangalore are watching exactly the same movie, all the network action will be just in Bangalore, because it's peer-to-peer traffic, right? It's not going to go to the Netflix server. The Netflix model is, if 1,000 people in Bangalore are watching the same movie, every single movie will be served from the Netflix server or from the Netflix CDN, right? So we have no clue today what tomorrow holds, and that's the danger of bundling the limited options of today. Yeah? That's the Barbara von Scheveck argument. Does that make sense? On the question of, is it possible to produce internet.org as a proxy, without the proxy? Of course it is, but they won't do it because Facebook's business model is what Bruce Schneier calls the business model of the internet, right? Surveillance. Unless they're collecting data, there's no point doing anything for you, right? So that is how Facebook makes money. So again, we can't depend on their charity. We'll have to push them using the various options we have. On jurisdiction, there are places like the Netherlands with very strong network neutrality regulation, which people like Facebook, etc., will find unacceptable. And most of the European countries where there is network neutrality regulation, all of them are also bound with the European Data Protection Directive. Therefore, things are safer in that jurisdiction. In the US, as you know, things are a lot more unclear. In Brazil, the Marco Civil, or the Internet Bill of Rights, was approved only in 2013, and sometime this time of the year, 2013. And the detailed rules or the decree under the Marco Civil for data protection is still not, so it's happening simultaneously. So the Brazilian situation and the Indian situation is exactly the same. We are simultaneously dealing with both policy questions. Whether the data protection regulation can reduce the amount of regulatory detail in network neutrality regulation, I don't think so, because network neutrality violation is still blocking, throttling, and zero rating, or charging differently for different destinations. That is the bundle of activities that are considered harmful. And privacy harms are second order harms and not seen by most regulators as the primary thing to go after. So they'll most probably assume that the privacy or data protection regulation will address the privacy harms. So they will not try and address all of that in a kind of omnibus network neutrality policy.
One last question, if anyone wants to ask. No questions? Thank you so much, sir, for the
Thanks for having
insightful
me.
talk.